All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for session 3 of our DEI series. Just a reminder today, right after Dana finishes his presentation, I'm going to take just a few minutes to tell you about an upcoming DEI grant opportunity that we have coming out for you guys. So until then, Dana, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you one and all for being present. It really makes me happy to see some faces here that have been here repeatedly. I really appreciate that. It does something very important for the consistency of the message and the follow through as well, versus just bringing up the recording and not being here. So thank you for being here again. Is everyone okay? One in the space, you can nod your head, because for now, thank you, Nancy, thumbs up and all that kind of jazz. We've got some work to do, okay? We're gonna do some back and forth via chat. I'm going to ask some relatively open-ended questions, try to impart to you a few tips in terms of dealing with some issues as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, okay? Any questions anybody have for me before we get started? Anything from previous session or anything at all? No one? Got someone else coming in, and I'll admit them too. I can do that too. Okay, thank you, Michael. I do have one left over from last time, not in terms of a question, but a comment and a follow through. The issue of pay inequity between males and females in the workplace came up as a topic. I may have introduced it, but I don't remember who it was, but someone in the group said that pay equity wasn't quote unquote real, and it because of the different dynamics, such as working more time and things of that nature, that can come into play. Well, I've done a phenomenal amount of research on this before, but you never know. You might miss something. You know how fast the world moves today with cyberspace. But I did some more, and I have a couple of very interesting links to send out to individuals to establish the fact that pay inequity based on gender is what it is, including introductory offers of salaries. And I'm going to send those to Michael and have them send it to all of you, so you likewise can see some of the empirical evidence of the reality of pay inequity and equity as it pertains to gender. All right. I lost a little sleep on that, but I just couldn't let that one sit. So I do want everyone to see that, and so you can come to your own conclusions based on the data. And whoever made the commentary in terms of extraneous factors being what they are, that pay inequity between the gender doesn't exist, I would love to hear back from you as well once you've read the empirical evidence, okay? All right, got a few other people coming in there. If you'd like to, we'd love to see your face. If that's not possible, it's understandable. You're not dressed in a way that you want to be dressed. If you don't want us all to see that particular room and space you're in, that's okay too. But we're very user-friendly when it comes to Zoom sessions that I coordinate for Michael. So if there's a child running around behind, or a dog, or a pet, or you have to get up in something, we're really okay with that. We really like to see your face in the place, though, when at all possible. Okay, anybody else on anything big, medium, or small? Now, I started off last session, and I'm going to start off this session at another place that did come up last time. And if you use your chat function to share, please, what are any issues related to diversity and equity and inclusion that stuck with you, resonated, you noticed over the last week, just since the last Wednesday when we together? Are there any issues in the media across this country only now, got to kind of keep it in the United States, that pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion? And if you would put, if any of those struck a chord with you in this chat room, I'd appreciate it, okay? Hey. Mental health. I just put ditto, and that's me on the ditto with the mental health, because that was going to be mine that I was going to share as well. Anybody, anything different? Police officer testifying, yeah, that was powerful, their testimony. It's always so amazing to me how someone could refute what someone actually experienced. It's different to say that I saw it this way, I saw it, but you're hearing from people who said this is what happened, and other people are saying that's not what it was. People were hugging and loving and all. Not the baton that I was getting beat with, not the name that I was being called. So it's maddening to some degree for me, but it also creeps into this whole conversation that we're trying to get better equipped to have under diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some individuals outside of the main, whatever the main is, and I say those are people who aren't actually experiencing what's going on, will sometimes try to deny your reality. They'll tell you that this is not going on, or it's all in your mind, or if you do this different, that's going to go away. These are some of the things we have to be prepared to engage in a conversation, not a fight. I don't want anybody hitting anybody, spraying bear spray on nobody, doing anything like that. But having a real live and genuine conversation, we have to be prepared for people who say the reality doesn't exist. You still have the Jewish Holocaust deniers out there in a major kind of way, said it didn't exist. You're kidding? Really? Yeah, people say that all the time. Branding certain sports for males or females, clothing of female athletes. That was a big one. Wonderful rebuttal also from the female athletes who wore the leotards versus going with the skimpy bathing suits or whatever they were required to wear. Trust me, that demonstration is going to make a difference. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Always like to hear what you're thinking, seeing, and connecting with you. All right. Okay, there's nothing else. Thank you for that. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through a few slides. I may stop at certain points in time and we will have an interaction, okay? Okay, let's see how this will work. Share screen. Okay. Everybody see the screen? So yes? Okay, if not, nod your head or send me a note and all of that.
Not yet.
Not yet?
No.
Okay. How's that?
It's coming. There it
Coming?
is. Yeah.
There it is. Got it? Okay. All right. All righty. Just trying to make that bigger. Okay, as you can see, I entitled, this is the third session we're having, and I've got that assemblage of tennis balls, not only because they're stacked in a pyramid. When dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, they're built on a foundation that some people might call less than serious, not very important. Issues like making jokes that are targeted to belittle people, not addressing particular statements and referring to them as macro or not very meaningful. But that pyramid foundation it's built on those jokes and sayings and slights of those nature, it builds its way all the way up to the top to an entire generation, culture, and kind of people can not only be offended, but they can be harmed and potentially attempted to be annihilated. So that foundational stuff, needless to say, we got to deal with that at the beginning, okay? Now, you know, we're mostly familiar with that good old great game called tennis. Just like in tennis, you got backhands, overhead smashes. You've got different kind of forays into this conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I like to say that it's really a three-tiered approach, and I've likened it to someone who is going, let's say, jet skiing on top of the water. We're just mildly dealing with some issues. And then we go to the next level, and I would call that snorkeling, where we're actually getting beneath the water. We're touching a few nerves, creating a little conflict that's inherent in the conversation. And finally, if we have the time, the interest, and the commitment, we can go to that level called scuba diving, where we'll need some additional assistance to deal with what the environment is and what we have to combat in terms of creating equity and appreciation for all natures. So the next one I like to entitle, What Would You Do? Give me a chat or a yes or a thumbs up or something if you have been familiar with that show that was so entitled, What Would You Do? Anybody see that before? Give me a hands up or a chat or a thumb in the air and something like that. Most people wave. Thank you for the wave, Nancy. Appreciate it. Thanks for the thumb. There we go. All right. Yeah. What about you, Eugene? Did you've heard of that one before? No? Okay. All right. Jim, have you heard of What Would You Do before the show? You did, Heather? Did you hear? Okay, I didn't see your finger up there. I'm sorry. Okay. Most have, but a few haven't. So just in terms of synopsis, What Would You Do is one of the major networks programming around helping people visualize atrocious things that could happen to other people. It's like bullying, discrimination, ill treatment, you name it. It ran the gamut. But then they would view it, use actors, and see what the surrounding public population would do if they were actually in the midst of one of these atrocious things happening. One of my favorites, and I don't mean favorite as in I like, I mean in terms of it was instrumental, was a Spanish-speaking individual going into a bagel shop and being refused service because he spoke such little English. The waiter behind would not actually wait on him, telling him to go back to Spain or Italy, wherever you came from, and that kind of thing. And the expression on some of the people's faces. Fortunately, in that episode, one of the individuals did intervene and said, hey, I'll buy it for him. He has money, I'll use it. This is what he wants, this is what he gets. And of course, the counter person still refused. But that's the nature of some of these kind of episodes. So what I'm going to do now is ask you that question, what would you do? And when I say, what would you do? The scenario is going to be, you showed up to work and on one of your tennis courts, there was a huge swastika, okay? Huge swastika painted on the court. Can't miss it. That's why I say huge, because some people say, I didn't see that. Okay, you saw this. It was encompassing the entire breadth of one side of the court, okay? What would you do? And that's a real question. And I want anyone to unmute themselves and respond to us as a group. If that happened at your facility where you were part of the community, what would you do? What would you do?
I would immediately get a tarp to cover it up, and then I would get somebody out there to try and clean it off. See if we can find out who did it. I'm sure our facility would have cameras.
Thank you for that. Would anybody else do anything differently than that?
I would call the police.
You would call the police? Why, Dave?
Well, it's obviously a crime. I mean, if nothing else, it's vandalism. And so, you know, that's something that needs to be addressed by the police.
Definitely a criminal act. Thank you for that, Dave. It is definitely a crime. Defacing of anyone's property.
Maybe even a hate crime.
It could, thank you for that, Holly. It can also come under the umbrella of a hate crime. Did you know several of our states in the union do not have hate crime legislation? All of you know that? So some people can't even be charged with a hate crime. I think it's about four states. Fortunately, not that many, but about 4 of them still don't have hate crime. And Georgia, by the way, just enacted theirs last year. I don't know if you're familiar, but they were under a whole lot of duress externally, but they finally came forth with a hate crime bill. Okay, right? For sure, for sure, for sure. Okay. All right, let's try another one. Okay. What would you do if an Asian American Pacific Islander person, at least from your visual frame, identified them, was told at your facility to go back to China, you're the cause of the Hong Kong flu, as they said, and this person actually received this commentary from a person who was a regular member inside of your facility where you belong. And of course, you were told this by this person. What would you do? What would you do? Anybody unmute themselves and let us hear it, please. And if other people who aren't speaking want to offer something in the chat, that's available too. What would you do?
Is it something that I heard firsthand, or did I hear
No,
it?
no, you did not hear it. Someone came and shared it with you. But they heard. They are a confidant that you are comfortable in believing they're telling you the truth. So not a stranger, but someone else who you well know. What do you say, Heather?
I think I would probably find out who said it. I would go to the person who it was said to and tell them that that is unacceptable behavior and to disregard what that person said. And then I would go to the person that said it, and we would have a serious conversation about that, you know, we do not discriminate, that we accept, and, you know, that was a really nasty, and we're an open park. So it's kind of, you know, it's not like I could kick them out of the park or anything, but
right.
I mean, we would have, there would be, look at repercussions for that. That's just unacceptable.
Thank you, Heather. Can I get another voice that we've not heard to respond to anything different other than what Heather's already shared that you might do if you experience that situation?
I would do something similar to what had a similar situation with a player that was being sort of abused by one of our players, and I had conversations with both of them to try and, especially the person who was being more abusive, about that wasn't acceptable. And anyway.
Okay. Thank you. What about, oh, hey, did I hear someone else?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if it's in the scope of the USTA league, the proper thing to do is to file a sportsmanship grievance. I mean, it's something that needs to be addressed directly by the governing body.
Ours actually was not in scope of USTA league. It was just a player we were aware of, and actually we had no authority over it. They were open play at the park where our offices are located, but I did know the person who was verbally abusing the other person, and so I felt that I should step in and try and help the situation if I could.
Thank you, Judy. So something of this ilk has actually occurred in your area, Judy?
Something, yes, it was about a handicapped person parking and then playing tennis, and anyway, some issues with that.
Thank you for that. Makes me feel better, because these scenarios that I'm showing you are actually real incidents. Dana didn't make them up or pull them out of the sky. They actually occurred at various venues, and all at various athletic venues. So I kept it under that umbrella specifically, but these things have actually occurred.
Dana,
go ahead.
I was actually told to my face that many years ago in the context of a league dispute, okay? And I couldn't believe the person would say that. It was a shock. And I reported it to the organization. Okay. And it was a long time ago with a sort of a complaint, but that episode has stayed with me forever. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Hispanic, and it hasn't happened again, but the analysis of the person that said it became something to think about the person's background, status, et cetera, et cetera. So for what it was worth. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Thank
would
you,
like
Matt.
to say in our, the issue I'm talking about was also the person who was being abused was Hispanic.
Wow. Manny, I thank you for sharing that, as well as you too, Judy. But Manny, I extend my apologies that it had to happen to you. I don't know if that makes any difference, but I'm sorry that it happened to you. And it happens to anybody of your culture, but it does happen. And folks, it happens on almost a regular basis, which is to say that when these incidents do occur, it's usually a peek into what else might also be occurring, and to the degree that we need to do something proactive about this so people realize our stance around appreciation, valuing all kinds and cultures. Folks, that doesn't happen to people like rain falling from the sky. In order to stop, interrupt, put a message out there that we are all-inclusive kind of environment, you got to be doing stuff and not just showing up, and not just showing up when people are all different. That doesn't do anything but get a whole lot of different people at the same place at the same time, okay? What are the messages? What are the things that we're saying to make sure that I am gravitating towards you and you are comfortable gravitating toward me? That's how we get to equity. And that equity starts with a conversation like I'm really proud to be a part of, that your organization is having with my outside assistants now. All right, let's look at another one. One of your colleagues came to work and showed you a Facebook posting of him or her at a party the previous week in blackface. What would you do? Again, one of your colleagues came to you directly, showed you a Facebook posting of a party they attended where they went in blackface. What would you do? Let's hear from a voice we possibly have not heard, but that doesn't mean I don't want people who've already spoken to speak again. But if this happened, what would you do?
I mean, I would probably pull them to the side and say, you might want to delete those. You shouldn't have, it would have been in your best interest not to participate in that type of activity. There's a history behind the blackface, and it's very hurtful to people of African American descent. I understand that you may not have known, but that's not a good idea. You should probably just delete those pictures and apologize to anybody else that may have seen them.
Yes. Now, we discussed your name last time. I'm going to try it. Correct me if I don't get it right. Is it Chiquetta?
You got it.
Thank you, Chiquetta. I want to particularly acknowledge you for bringing forth the informational part of your response, in terms of the person may not have had a realization of pain that has caused our particular community, or the African American, however view. I think that important part is sometimes left out. We get many calls. When I say we, I'm an independent consultant now, but I also consult with a few organizations that their role is addressing bias, bigotry, and discrimination, however it presents itself. We get a lot of calls when people have done atrocious things targeting a certain community, and they say they didn't realize it was causing any harm. You want to scratch your head and say, this is 2021, but got to give them the benefit of the doubt. So let me share with you the harm that that causes. Anybody else? Someone shows you a picture of blackface, they went to the party looking like that. What would you say? What would you do? Give me another voice in there, please.
If this person is someone I know closely, I would confide in the person privately. Do you know what this stands for, what it means? just to make sure that the person is aware, or if it's not aware, then I can confidently and privately discuss it with him or her, the implications of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Eugene. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your voice. Absolutely. And you also bring something else up, Eugene, in your intervention, if that was someone you knew, in terms of determining whether or not you do that reaction in public or in private. Sometimes you have to pull people aside. Sometimes it has to happen in the public arena because that's where it occurred. But I think it's something we also have to think about. Belittling and being rude to another person because of the reaction sometimes can make it worse. So we also want to feel that frame out in terms of, do I handle it now? Let's go over this. Let's go over to the side here and let me talk to you a little bit, kind of a thing. Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? Gone. That's our what would you do segment. One of the things, unfortunately, that continues to come across the frames for assistance from a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant is that people don't know what to do. First of all, they're surprised. I didn't believe it would happen here. Folks, it happens anywhere and everywhere where people are different and everybody's different. So please don't longer let that be a surprise to you. But people get frozen. It's like, really? Somebody said that to you? Sure did. Really, Manny? You damn Skippy. They said it right to my face. Wasn't no confusion. They didn't stutter and my ears weren't flapping. Yeah, someone wrote that. They sure did. They sure did. So again, what do? How do you do it? What are the tools I might have or the tools that I might need to address it? Is it a localized thing? Do I need to get other people involved? All those kind of questions. But freezing in place and ignoring it is not one of the things that we want to adhere to. Here's some helpful hints. Some helpful hints. You can explain the pain, the impact that it had if someone said or did something particularly targeted that's hurting a particular group of people, and I could care what group of people that was. You can also ask a question and jumping to conclusions that you intended to cause harm, you know that was damaging. Ask the question, where did you learn that? Who taught you to say that? Why do you feel or sense that way? To get a better understanding of where this person might or might not be coming from. You can interrupt and redirect the conversation. It might be just an inappropriate time and we can just say, hey, what about those Falcons? Just for that moment now, and just take the conversation somewhere else until we can come back to it and more directly pinpoint it. Don't minimize or ignore the situation. A lot of people want to stick their heads in the sand and act like that's a one-time happenstance occurrence, get thick skin kind of a thing. No. If you're seeing vestiges of these things happening in your greater community, trust me, they're happening more oftentimes than you actually see them. And last but not least, request assistance. You might need some help. How to appropriately address it? How can I do it in a fashion that's going to make it better and not worse? Why am I nervous about dealing with this issue? All of that can come from particular assistance. So don't be scared to ask for help if one of these things happen in your purview or happen to someone that you know or in your particular community. Speaking of community, I think we need a few notes, and I say we, I say the collective we. Trust me, I'm included in my conversation. I think we need a few notes in terms of building community. And I want to do it this way. I want you to imagine a community that does not respect diversity, inclusion, or equity. They have no need, no desire, don't want it around. Okay, period. Don't want to hear about that stuff here, period. This is what this community is. This is who they are. Please chat or unmute yourself, and we'll be looking at both in terms of what are some of the things that are occurring in those communities that have no need, no desire, no respect for diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are some of the things that are happening? What are some of the things that are being said? please share that in your chat or unmute yourself, and you can give us a few of the things that might be occurring in that type of community out loud, okay?
Since no one speaks, I'll speak.
Thank you, Manny.
My theory has always been that a community like that has a lot to do with their background, their education, and other factors that go way back, not necessarily the immediate situation or impact. It's a very complex situation, I would say, for sure. But it's more than the surface. It's sort of an ingrained feature, if you will. So, you know, it has a lot of moving parts.
Thank you, Manny. In a social setting at a private club, I was told by a member that they chose this particular club and community because there were no Black people. Thank you for that. We ultimately become very divisive. Yeah. Anybody else in terms of what would occur in those communities where diversity, equity, and inclusion was not only not desirable, it was actually not accepted, appreciated, or believed that it was needed? Any else? Any else? Okay. All right. Let me change a little bit then. Let me ask the question this way. And thank you for all who responded, who thought about responding, who were not comfortable responding, and who did respond. Some of the other things, though, that would be going on in a community where diversity and equity and inclusion would not be valued, there would be an intensified nature of segregation. There would be different treatment at hospitals, at banks, at schools, and by law enforcement, just to name a few entities, all right? There would be a lot of private clubs, all right? There would be a lot of non-sleepovers across diversity spectrums. You're not staying in my place and please don't bring them home, right? Closed-minded selfishness, absolutely, a lot of that, okay? That's what occurs in communities that do not value diversity, equity, and inclusion, okay? We had a sports team that was recently sanctioned in the United States because they were beaten by a team who was almost exclusively Latino in the same division, and the fans threw tacos on the court when they beat their team. Fortunately, the organization who managed the sports teams, and this is high school now, they expelled them from the league. Not acceptable, not close to being okay. But that's another incident will happen. People will feel comfortable offending people who they consider to be the other, where diversity, equity, and inclusion is not valued. Now, let me flip the script and I'm going to ask you, and again, I'll accept anybody who wants to unmute themselves or put something in chat, but the question is different this time. This time, the question is, what about a community that actually values diversity, equity, and inclusion? What are some of the things that you see happening and occurring in those particular communities? And I'll ask it again. What are some of the things in a community that values diversity, equity, and inclusion? What are some of the things that are said? What are some of the interactions you would expect? What would you see done in those types of community as it pertains to the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion? We value it, we appreciate it, we know how important it is. Anybody?
I think in that situation, you'd have a much more cohesive community.
I would definitely believe so, Dean. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for unmuting and saying that. Anybody else? What
value.
I've seen personally is the acceptance of the country clubs and having outside folks from public parks, allowing them to come to the country clubs and having matches. So that inclusion, I think, is what I've seen in our community. Thank you, Mike. And Tammy, thank you for letting us know you're driving and you're paying attention. I really, really appreciate that, one and all. You'll see a lot more interracial relationships, cross-cultural relationships. You'll see a lot more inclusiveness in their curriculum that their students are being taught at schools. You will see a lot more demonstration toward discriminatory bias, be it toward people of color, Asians, whites, gay, you name it. People will have voices and they will use them in communities that really value diversity and equity and inclusion. All right. That's the community we wished we all had and we were all a part of. But we know that's not real. Some are there, some have a long way to go, some have a shorter distance to travel. But one thing is about diversity, equity, and inclusion, to make it appreciated and make sure it's a part of our mainstream, we have to do the work, folks, and it takes work. And it takes work. Let me see.
Dana, I just wanted to add that, and I did put this in the chat, that communities that fail to, well, communities that embrace, since you asked the question a different way, DE&I will absolutely experience positive differences and improvements in their economics as well, and their growth of their communities. I think we will see, as we get closer to 2030 in those timeframes when the majority will be the minority, and in the increasing population of Black and Brown people, that the decision makers also, that trend will start to follow. And so I think that, you know, strategically speaking, it makes sense. And I also want to say this, that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just a race thing. And I think you spoke to this as well. It's a sexual orientation. It's it goes just into so many different avenues. I work in the medical field, and one of the things that we've been debating is how to properly refer to certain specialties because of now the transgender differences, et cetera, and how we have to really respect how people self-identify. So it's a very complicated topic, but those companies who are forward thinking, or those communities that are forward thinking about this, I think really will stay on the cutting edge of economic advantages and decisions that will be made by companies that can apply leverage into whether or not they make determinations about where they're going to locate things like their headquarters and where they're going to actually expand. So I say all that to say that it's lots of economics associated with D&I as well.
Thank you ever so much for sharing that. And I did see your comment in the chat function as well. But you're absolutely right. It definitely impacts the economic success of a particular community. And a lot of folks don't see it that way because they don't make the connectiveness between the strength of diversity and using it instead of combating it in their particular community. I'm going to ask you to send Michael your email address, because I just received an article about diversity, equity in the medical community that I think might even open up some brand new eyes for you. But I want to forward that to you. So please send Michael your email address when we get off, okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Last but not least, in terms of creating a community that actually respects diversity, inclusion, and equity, is if you run into barriers, what we want to do is move from that community that has no respect for that inclusion, that appreciation and valuing and appreciating and accepting differences, to that community that does. But to get there, to bridge that gap, we're going to run into barriers. Some of those barriers are going to be institutional. Some of them are going to be individual, okay? From our standpoint in the time that we have right now, let's just speak to a few of the individual barriers. What kind of a barrier or blockade might an individual put in our way in trying to transcend that gap from moving from a community that does not value diversity, equity, and inclusion to one that does? What can an individual do to get in the way of that particular progress, I'll call, in terms of appreciating diversity, equity, and inclusion? Can someone unmute themselves and respond to that question for me, please? What can an individual do to stop the progress?
I would start, if you don't mind.
I don't mind, please, Eugene.
Yeah, sometimes there is a genuine, let me say, situation in terms of genuine naivety or ignorance, or just plain bereft, not enough information or knowledge about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what it actually means. This could be a huge barrier in terms of information. How informed is this person? So that could be a huge one to begin with. Beyond that, there are more serious ones that we can count on, to like just not agreeing or seeing it the way others see. And it's, of course, we see things differently, but disagreeing to agree and agreeing to disagree is one thing. And the fact or the truth is also another thing to consider.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? What individuals can do to try to derail progress toward moving into a community that is more respectful of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Anyone else? What an individual might do to create that barrier?
I think, this is Nancy. I think a lot of it has to do with fear. And that ties back into what the last gentleman just said. If you're not informed, then sometimes you're either afraid of changing the status quo, losing your own identity or power, or just, and you're afraid that someone else being lifted up might bring you down.
Yes, yes. That's old zero. We call that old zero-sum game kind of mentality, Nancy. Yeah. If I get, that means you have to lose, or vice versa. And that's not necessarily the case. Thank you for that very, very much. One thing I like, if there's no one else to offer into the fray of an individual, is the importance of people in power broking and power making positions in the organization to lead the way when we're talking valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I, far from knowing all of your leadership staff across the country in Georgia, I do know a couple, and I must give a shout out and a testament to the fact that this wouldn't be happening without their leadership. Likewise, diversity, equity, and inclusion interventions throughout an organization or institution does not happen without the leadership of those at the top. It's still a top-down kind of thing. Now, we can have rumblings that put pressure on them to make it happen, but typically when it happens in a way that's most productive and most change-oriented, it comes with input and support from the top. So that's something that the individual, an individual person who is chapter president or organizational lead or team captain, you name it, that's something that they can do if they choose to do to leap those barriers of resistance. And that's important and very important. In Cobb County, there was a counselor last week who quit her job. She happened to be a female Caucasian, some people say white counselor, and she quit her counseling position in the school system in Cobb County because she was tired of meeting with the resistance of dealing with the racism that's inside of that school system. She's dealing with it for years. She sees it. She gave examples. She turned in her walking papers. they had a vote on whether or not they would discuss issues of diversity in the classroom, and it was denied, and it was split between the school board, those on the progressive side of the aisle versus those on the conservative. One interesting thing, though, was those on the so-called progressive side of the aisle, instead of voting in favor of having an intervention that acknowledges differences and values diversity, they abstained from voting. So that doesn't tell me where you are. You've got to have a voice in some, like I say, skin in the game, because people need to know where you are. Where do you sit? You take whatever license you want, experience-based, and you do or you do not want. But we need to know where other people stand and other people sit on these issues. And that's what leads us to some of the challenges in having an effective conversation. But whether than have some of these ugly episodes happen to individuals, unsuspecting children, or people in our communities and at our social clubs and on our tennis courts, we've got to insist that the conversation has to happen, okay? Any other questions at all? Going once, going twice, going, okay? Trying to get these. Now, one brief bit I had to bring in here about culture. We've not touched on this in our 3-part series, but I want to touch on it just a little bit now. Culture is the mores, the actions, the interventions, the conversation, the pictures, the training, the relationships that happen on a regular basis inside of organizations as well as inside of private homes that you are part of. There are a lot of contributing factors in terms of culture and what makes a culture open versus closed, receptive, biased versus non-biased. Things have to go on, and they have to go on a regular basis, not just in response to something that has happened that has exposed our culture to be not as open and as inclusive as we thought it was or we said it was. We got to have ongoing things. We got to have pictures that reflect people from different backgrounds, and everybody's different. Sometimes when we hear different, people don't hear white. Please put white in different, okay? You got to have people from all backgrounds, ilks, culture, and kinds reflected to the degree that you're able to in participation. It's not easy. We got to do read-ins. I call it read-in, suggesting an article or a book that all the leadership should read or ingest, and then let's talk about it. We got to have a response to national-oriented issues like those you put early on around mental health and how it affects the athlete and how it affects intersectional athletes different than other athletes. We've got to be able to have those conversations. We got to have those conversations about whether or not I want my child to be taught about the cultural underpinnings of what created this country and how this country was created. I got to have the conversation. We do our best not to judge or to exclude people based on their responses to that conversation. But we got to have the conversation if we're ever to move the needle toward that moral arc that says we're all one humanity and we should all be treated fairly. It's more than a notion, ladies and gentlemen. It takes work. It takes a lot of work. Trust me, take it from someone who's working on it for 30 years and coming up with something new and something different almost every other week these days. I know it takes work. If you're really in the modality of saying that I'm on that train that says, I want to do something positive about including people and respecting backgrounds, it's kind of like waking up and feeling the resistance of a automatic board or sidewalk and going in the wrong direction. You know, it's going to take work. You know, I'm not just walking up and going along with the sidewalk. I have to do some things. I have to say some things. One of the things that I incorporated into my early beginnings of what they then called diversity consultant was subscribing to a Ms. magazine. And forgive me if I mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning again. I did not realize how bereft my thought process was of the distaff, the female half of reality by way of reading until I was recommended to get Ms. magazine. Now, all the pronouns are her, she, and those kind of things in Ms. magazine. If that was not there, my default was him and he. I don't care what it was I read, how I read it. If it didn't say she, it was a him. Okay, it was a he. And it like hit me like a ton of bricks. Really? Yes, really. And I didn't go any further with letting you realize that when you do not see the other end of the spectrum, how negligent and insensitive you can be. So that's just one thing that I incorporated into my own upbringing in terms of valuing and appreciating diversity more. But there's a lot of things you can do to really make a difference, okay? I have a short video that I'd like you to watch. This is our third and final lunch date. So I found one that said lunch date, right? So I want you to take it in, take a look, and tell me what you get from seeing this one, all right?
Don't. Please don't touch them. I'll take care of those. No.
All right, let me give you a hand.
No, don't. No, no, no. You're making me miss my train. How much is this salad?
$2.
Well, I'm not sure that I have that much. $1. Here's some more. Here's some more.
All right, $1.52. There you go, lady.
Thank you. Napkin?
Surely.
salad. That's my salad. No, thank you. Thank you. Oh my God. Oh my Lord.
Everybody got any change? Any change? Excuse me. Can you spare some change to eat? Please, 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 man. God.
Thank you, and I apologize for the 2 or 3 minutes running over. I really wanted to show that video because it's over 70 years of age And it shows you how long we've been grappling with the issue to stop making assumptions and one day realize that sometimes friends are just strangers we've never met. Michael, I thank you. Kudos to you. Please extend my deepest appreciation to Beth. Thank you for allowing this, supporting, and making this intervention happen. And I thank each and every one of you. This little certificate you see here, I'm going to get your names emblazoned, and everybody who sat in all 3 sessions in person, made time, said something or didn't say something, you're going to get one of these to say that, hey, I made at least a commitment to listen. Thanks, Michael. Thank each and every one of you. Have a wonderful day, week, and the rest of the year, and stay healthy out there, okay?
Great.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Before I get into the new grant thing, let's all just give Dana a great big hand. It's been a great 3 sessions. Thank you so much. You've been wonderful, and I've enjoyed getting to know you over the last 3 weeks. And so it's the beginning of a new friendship. So I appreciate your time and everything. So I want to talk about this new grant opportunity that we have. As Dana said, this takes work. This DEI stuff, and this is a continuous effort. It's not just one conversation. It's not just these last 3 sessions that we got to be together with. We'd like to see this conversation of DEI continue at the local level, and through our board, our leadership, and especially our president, Mark Botch, we have some funds that were earmarked this year for DEI. And our diversity committee has been working very hard, and all the committee members are awesome. And our chair, Carolyn Watkins, has been leading this charge. She couldn't be with us today, but she'll watch this video. So thank you, Carolyn, when you watch this. So we have a brand new DEI grant that's going to be rolling out in the next week or 2. This grant is going to be for up to $1,500 towards a training similar to what we just did, but for you at the local level, for your board, your staff, if you have it, for your committee members, some volunteers, whoever at your local level in your organization that you want to bring in. Part of what we're doing, we have put together a facilitator list. So facilitators you could choose to help lead this training session. Dana very graciously has agreed to be one of those as well. And this might be that it's a virtual training, or it might be that it's an in-person. Really depends on which facilitator you decide to work with. And if there's someone in your local community that that does DEI work, and you might already have a relationship, it is totally fine to work with them as well. Like I said, this new application and everything is going to be coming out in the next week or 2. What I will do is I will email everyone that is registered for this this series of DEI that we've done, and I'll also email all the CTA leadership when it comes online. And we want to make sure that we utilize these funds and this grant for this year. Hopefully next year we'll have some funds as well, but we never know how that's going to go. But again, as you've seen, this is a continuous effort. We want this to be part of the norm of how your culture works in your organization. We obviously all have lots of work to do, and I will help as best as I can to help you move that dial forward. And we keep trying to do it at our office, and with people like Dana helping us, hopefully we're going to get those steps going. So that's it. So to be on the lookout for that email, I will share that with you. Again, big thanks out to Dana.
Thank you.
I will be posting this recording again, send you an email as soon as it is posted. But until then, everyone, please take care. Thank you for participating. You've been great. So we'll see everyone later.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.